That file is in the back room, Miss Prentice. I put it away with the old file. Well, his gross average is between $25,000 and $30,000 a year. He's been a client for 15 years. Well, if he wants the records looked up, look them up. After all, we're his accountants. Yes, I'll be here till train time tomorrow. Oh, shudder to think of the confusion I'll have to clean up when I get back. Now, you're sure you'll have this finished by tonight? I would like to have everything packed before I go to bed.
I'll finish it, Miss Burroughs. I've never failed one of my ladies yet. And I think you have a very pretty wardrobe to take to the Green Mountains. I'll bet there won't be a girl at the writers' conference better dressed.
A girl. Sometimes I think of myself as a girl. I used to read these advertisements when I was a girl. Writers' conference, ideally situated in beautiful Vermont mountains, informal atmosphere, advice at once friendly and honest, contacts with other writers, editors, and publishers, provides a stimulating and memorable experience. And each year I'd think, next year I'll do it. And this year I'm doing it.
Well, I'm glad. The talent for writing is God-given, Miss Burroughs, and you have it. You certainly have it.
Well, that's sweet of you to say so, Mrs. Trimmingham.
Oh, I loved your book. It was beautiful. I cried when I read it.
Well, I wish the publishers agreed with you.
You know what I think? I think the people who sent it back never even read it. If they had, they'd been on their knees begging you to let them publish it. Now, would you just turn around a little? That's fine. You know, the other day I was making some alterations for Mrs. Todd, and you went by. And you know what she said? She said she could never understand why you never married Todd Stillman.
That was 10 years ago.
But he still likes you, Miss Burroughs. If you've noticed, he's never married. Well, I'll get this sewed up in a couple of hours and press it, and you can pack it. She said that if you had married Todd Stillman, you'd have one of the richest farms in the county, and then you wouldn't have to worry about being a writer.
I don't worry about being a writer. I am a writer. Where is Mr. Brandish's lecture being given?
Lecture room B. The lecture starts very soon.
Mr. Brandish is the editor of Finesse, isn't he?
There he is. Well, you see, Miss, he's one of our best speakers. Have you entered a manuscript for criticism?
Yes, I hope he gets a chance to read it. I would so like his opinion.
Well, you never can tell what manuscript will be picked. He selects them at random, not knowing the author, so he can give an impartial criticism. You'll just have to take your chances with the others.
I suppose I will. Thank you.
Summer after summer, men and women travel from whistle stops all over the country up here to the Green Mountains for this writers' conference. You all come expecting us to tell you that your story should be worth $1,000 of any magazine's money. Now, we editors of magazines are very careful how we spend our publishers' money. We have to be, or we get the axe. So many people seem to think that all it takes to be an author is a typewriter and a ream of bond paper. Many people have the impudence to think that everybody wants to hear them sob their sick little souls out on paper. The author of this manuscript, whom I judge as a woman, is typical of what I mean. Not only she, but many aspiring writers could spend their time to better advantage visiting a psychiatrist. Now, permit me to review this remarkable story for you as briefly as possible. It deals with a dreary little accountant who decides to stop being an accountant and become a writer. Well, so far, so good. As the story opens, the heroine is mailing a manuscript of a novel to a publisher in a nearby city. This novel, she would have us believe, means everything to the heroine. Life itself. The author gives us a tiresome bit about its being a part of her, as though it were the child she never had. She would have us believe that our heroine has paid a penalty for living a life of drudgery. The penalty being the absence from her life of all major emotions that might have given it meaning. I can believe that this author's life is empty. This woman wouldn't know a major emotion if she tripped over it. Now, I'm aware that this author is no doubt at the moment within range of my voice. This may be at the moment unfortunate, but it might conceivably have its blessings. If I can, by taking up this manuscript with candor, turn the author from the obvious error of her ways, something will have been accomplished at this session. Now let us examine the story in detail. What an imagination. This drab little creature suddenly blossoms into a vibrant being, completely unshackled by all inhibitions. She moves from one amour to another, all with incomparable grace and worldly wisdom. I'll spare you the painful details of the accountant awaiting the editor's answer. She finally goes to see him. The editor gives this woman some advice. He says, "For heaven's sake, woman, stop writing. Go out and live. Let yourself go." So, she goes. She goes out, buys herself a pistol, and comes back and shoots the editor through his cruel heart. Any comments?
Well, I was wondering while you were talking, isn't it possible that this plot, if one read it for himself, might prove quite moving?
I sincerely hope, madam, that someone will publish this story and give you the opportunity to judge that for yourself. Personally, I wouldn't have this story in my magazine if I were driven to publishing nursery rhymes in its place. Why? The plot is artificial, completely impossible. The characterizations are phony.
No, thank you. I'll just have a salad, please. Thank you. Thank you.
May I?
Certainly. May I join you also?
Oh, Mr. Brandisher, won't you sit with us here?
Oh. Glad you asked me. I don't like eating alone. Thank you.
May I have the salt, please?
My name is Brandisher.
I know. I'm Emily Burroughs. I attended your lecture this morning.
Oh, that was a rough one. I felt sorry for the writer.
Oh, poor dear.
Well, I, for one, found it a most enlightening lecture, Mr. Brandisher.
About that story, Mr. Brandisher, isn't it possible that the author exaggerated the editor deliberately?
No, I don't think so. An editor's life is no bed of roses. You know, we have to plow through some pretty awful stuff day after day. Sometimes I'd like to rip up manuscripts and make the writers responsible for them eat the pieces bit by bit. Take the writer of the novel that I discussed this morning. She's probably a wilted little daydreamer who would smolder for years but never ignite. Do you see what I mean, Miss Burroughs?
Oh, I do, Mr. Brandisher. Indeed, I do.
I know you're interested in writing, Miss Burroughs, but what do you do normally?
Well, I'm an actress. Not very well known, but very good.
Really, I've always been interested in the theater. I've even acted in a number of amateur things. I flatter myself that I wasn't bad at all.
Oh, I'm sure you were simply wonderful. You give people the feeling you can look into their innermost thoughts. It takes that to make a good actor, I believe. Excuse me.
Miss Burroughs, I hope I see you again.
Oh, well, I'm sure you will, Mr. Brandisher. I have a feeling we'll be seeing a good deal of each other. Good afternoon, Mrs. Sims.
I was held up a little on the rules this morning. You know, there are days when just everything goes wrong.
Aren't there just?
Are you going to the poetry reading class this afternoon?
No, I'm going to think, Mrs. Sims. Just lie down and think.
A good lecture makes you want to do just that, doesn't it?
Certainly does, Mrs. Sims. Your door was conveniently unlocked.
Did you want to see me?
Would I be likely to be here if I didn't?
Can I give you a drink?
No, thank you very much.
Do you mind if I have one?
Oh, not at all. Mr. Brandisher, I'm the author of the story that made you so unhappy this morning. I'd like to discuss it with you. You said the murder, its motivation, and the act itself were not convincing, that neither the woman nor the editor would do those things.
That's right. They wouldn't. Neither of them are in character. A writer can get by with a lot of things, but not with that.
Suppose I were to tell you that story actually happened.
I wouldn't believe it.
Even if I told you I was the woman who killed the editor?
Particularly not then. If you had, you wouldn't be here. You'd be in prison.
Oh, but you see, they didn't catch me, Mr. Brandisher. It's a relatively small community I live in, and everyone knows me, and my conduct is as dependable as the hall clock. The editor, on the other hand, was a New Yorker, known primarily as a man of peculiar habits and acquaintances. And on the morning of his murder, he was seen in a bar having a violent quarrel with a disreputable character who mysteriously disappeared that day. And presumed to be the assailant, they sent out a search for the man, but they never found him.
That's not very conclusive. You would have me believe that this author was in reality yourself. But surely someone would have known you were with the editor? A housekeeper? Secretary?
Oh, he was an eccentric. He hated having people underfoot. The cleaning woman left at noon that day, and quite by luck, which you editors so abhor in stories, but which in reality is a consistently determining factor in man's destiny, the secretary was ill that day, and we were alone. Quite as alone as you and I are now. At the inquest, I told of my visit 4 hours before the body was discovered. And despite the possibility of my guilt, no one ever seriously considered it. You see, knowing my background, the logical conclusion was for me to commit such an act was simply, well, not in character.
Your imagination, Miss Burroughs, is getting wilder with the minute.
The editor was really the murderer. He took the work I loved and threw it in my face like a piece of trash. And so I shot him. It was just as simple as that.
And I suppose there was no evidence, such as fingerprints?
Oh, I wore gloves on that occasion, as I have now.
Oh. How did you come into possession of the gun?
Well, my father was the constable in our town for 10 years before he died. You know, Thoreau once said, some circumstantial evidence is very strong, as when you find a trout in the milk. Or was it Emerson? Anyway, here it is, Mr. Brandisher. I've come to kill you.
Are you mad? Put that thing away.
Well, I can't kill you with my bare hands. Not that I wouldn't like to, understand.
My dear woman, you're upset. I'm sorry if I said anything to offend you this morning. Now, if you think it would help, I'm willing to try to take some of the sting from my criticism in front of the whole class tomorrow.
Oh, you won't be alive tomorrow, Mr. Brandisher. As you say in the stories you publish in Finesse, we're going to have a little talk. Sit down.
You're out of your head.
Do you think so?
I'd like to see your story published as much as you would.
Oh, now, Mr. Brandisher, I wouldn't want to die with a lie on my lips if I were you. However, it's your choice.
Killing me won't get your story published. Why should we both die? You'll go to the electric chair.
Well, the electric chair might be the incidental result, but you can just bet your bottom dollar my story will be published so fast your head would swim. That is, if it were here to swim, which it won't be.
Now, Miss Burroughs, you've taken my criticism much too seriously. As a matter of fact, your story isn't bad. It's quite... That is, the writing itself isn't bad.
And you can see for yourself the situation is convincing.
A little unusual, perhaps. Yes, I can see that it might have happened. Viewed from many directions.
Viewed from the muzzle of a gun?
The plot isn't bad. Why, we've published stuff.
What was that word again?
We published stories, much less.
Much less convincing, perhaps?
Yes, that's it. Much less convincing.
I'll bet. You know, your death will bring me fame of a sort. Free advertising for my novel. Why, who knows, my life story might even be published in your own magazine.
Do you go around killing everybody who doesn't like your stories?
Not who doesn't like Mr. Brandisher, who is so insensitive as to laugh at someone else's dreams. In that lecture hall this morning in front of all those people, you tortured me. You reached into my innermost thoughts, tore them out, and held them up wriggling.
Now listen to reason, Miss Burroughs. If it means so much to you, I think I can arrange to have your story published. In my own magazine. Your name on the front cover. Would you like that? I'll telephone the editor-in-chief right now.
You won't move. You may not think I'm a good writer, but I'm not a moron.
I'll tell him I've made a wonderful discovery. Finesse hasn't made a real discovery in years. 2 whole years.
Poor Finesse. A letter from you might be just as effective.
Yes, of course. And it would be in writing.
In your handwriting.
Yes, of course. In my handwriting. Dear Harry.
Your editor-in-chief is named George, as you very well know. My forefinger is getting tired, and I am subject to tension, which is practically paroxysmal. So get on with it before I get sick of the whole thing.
Dear George, I have had a really amazing experience up here in the Green Mountains. I have met a really exceptional writer who has written a really terrific story.
You're a very unconvincing writer, Mr. Brandisher. I will dictate the letter. Dear George, I have come upon a story up here which is quite impressive. The character and the plot are dramatic and believable. You do believe it, don't you?
Oh, yes. Yes, I do, Miss Burroughs.
The climax is an exciting but a natural evolution. The author shows great promise. I have taken the liberty of offering to buy her story for... What figure would you suggest, Mr. Brandisher?
Would $10,000 please you?
Oh, immensely. But I'm a murderer, not a robber. What do you customarily pay for a first novel?
5 or 6,000.
Well, let's be fair. Make it 5. Oh, and add one more sentence. I would like to see the first installment in our next issue.
Next issue. There.
Sign it.
Yes, of course.
Put it on the edge of the desk.
Now, will you please put down that gun so we can be friends, Miss Burroughs?
Certainly. The Honorable Mr. Brandisher, hero.
You will hand over that letter and put up your hands.
I will do no such thing. The cartridges are blanks and the gun is an imitation, manufactured for little kids who play cowboys.
You won't get away with this. I'll take that letter by force.
Oh, you just try it. I'll scream the neighborhood down.
I'll telephone George Pearson tomorrow.
Oh, you do it, I'll make such a fool of you, you'll wish you'd never been born. A man over 6 feet tall held at bay with a child's toy pistol. It's very unconvincing, wouldn't you say?